Hello. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
Good afternoon, good evening, depending on which time zone you're in. So welcome everyone to the fourth talk in the frame of Radical Voices, Radical Actions from Support Art Workers. I'm here with Constantina, and our guests today are Amparo and Diego from Escena Política in Argentina. So Constantina will introduce our guests in a moment, but I'll just tell everyone a little bit about this event and this series. So this series of talks is organized by Support Art Workers, an initiative that emerged in April 2020 during the first lockdown in Greece as a reaction to the fact that art workers remained surprisingly invisible for the state as it was announcing its measures of support for the different sectors. And the main aims of the initiative, which has brought together almost 25,000 art workers from different artistic disciplines, is to give visibility on a short-term basis to the current needs of art workers in terms of state support in the frame of the pandemic, but also on a longer term to provide a framework for the design of a serious and complete plan for cultural policy in Greece, which at the moment is totally absent. In this framework, the Assembly for the Organisation and Coordination of the initiative operates via different subgroups, each with its own aims and objectives. SOAR Nexus, that's us coordinating this event, is a subgroup that aims to expand the connectivity of the initiative with colleagues and organizations, both in Greece and abroad. So this action, Radical Voices, Radical Actions, we specifically aim to connect and exchange with artists and cultural workers globally to discuss concrete ideas and actions that seek to make bold shifts in cultural policy and social organization. So I'd just like to welcome everyone also who's watching live on the Facebook page, on the Support Art Workers Facebook page. Thanks for being here with us, and please join in this discussion by writing any questions and comments that you have in the comments section on the Facebook Live video, which can be in English or Greek or Spanish, and we will translate them. They'll be filtered through for us by Dana and Bettina, our colleagues who are also looking after the Facebook. So yes, please do get involved in whichever language you choose. So welcome everyone. I'm going to pass on to Constantina, who's going to introduce our guests in a little bit more detail.
Thank you, Gary, and welcome, Amparo and Diego. It's a great pleasure to have you here and to have this exchange happening between, Greece, even if we are not all in Greece at the moment, and Argentina, even if not both of you are there at the moment. So we can see how space and location are quite relative.
And it's our first meeting with anyone from any South American.
Exactly, exactly.
Great privilege.
So thank you for being with us in this discussion to shortly present you, and everyone who is attending, viewing this event, they can also find a longer bio note of Escena Política on the website, on our Facebook event also. So we have today Amparo González Sola and Diego Echegoyen, performing artists and members of the collective Escena Política from Argentina. The collective was formed around 2015, the bio note says, but we discovered that maybe it has been earlier also, 2014, so we will hear about that in a bit, when they began to carry out actions that questioned and rendered visible dark areas of politics and cultural production in the city of Buenos Aires. And more recently, just last year, and amidst a pandemic, they came together again in a larger constellation to work against structural racism. We have invited Amparo and Diego to talk to us firstly about how Escena Política came together. What was the climate in Buenos Aires in 2015 that made imperative for you the formation of your collective? What did you do? What were your actions? And after this section of the discussion, we will go on to hear about their more recent actions against structural racism, which has also led them to making alliances with other collectives and artists and academics. Before we start with listening to Amparo and Diego, another reminder to give us your comments and questions on the chat. Παρακαλώ, ας γράφετε τις ερωτήσεις σας κατά τη διάρκεια της συνομιλίας μας κάτω από το βίντεο στα ελληνικά. Μπορείτε να το κάνετε και εμείς θα τα μεταφράζουμε. And you can also write in Spanish if you want, because yeah, Amparo and Diego can also respond to those questions.
Excellent. So Amparo and Diego, if you don't mind taking the floor for a bit and telling us what indeed happened in 2015, or was it 2014? How did you find each other and what were your first actions? So if you'd like to present a little bit about that, and then Constantino or myself might have some questions. And if indeed any questions come in from the Facebook, then we will be sure to ask you those as well. So over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Constantina and Gary. First, I would like to thank you for this invitation. It was a very nice exercise, try to think about the origins of the collective, but also we both agree that it has a big value, this kind of exchange between collectives, the possibility of sharing experiences and tools. So we are very happy for that. I made some notes because we don't have so much time and I don't want to forget nothing. Yes, as you said, we are not completely sure if we start to gather in 2014 or 15. There are many stories coexisting and we let these stories to be there. But it was in this period that in Argentina was at the moment the macrismo, that is the Argentinian version of neoliberalism, the most neoliberal part, in the city of Buenos Aires was the party. And we began to meet at this moment as a reaction to the policies of this government. We were reacting to the policies of emptying the cultural area, the abandonment of the theaters, the public theaters, the precarization of the working conditions of artists and other art workers, the decrease in the budget destinated to arts, the dodgy management of funds, the gender inequality and sexist violence in the public institutions, among other issues. And of course, it was not all at the same time, but these subjects appears in these years. Our first action had the aim to visibilize and produce a reflection about these issues, and at the same time to demand concrete answers from the government. So some of the actions we did were also accompanied by legal demands. In 2015, we did an action that we named Ballet. And during the night, we intervened the facades of the public theaters, of the main theaters, with banners with questions. For example, one of these questions was 16 years with the same directors of the ballet. We did the same year, we did another action that was named Postales, in which we did kind of a caravana through the main theaters. And in each theater, we put a row of chairs and we, again with banners, we share the information of the state of this theater. For example, closed for 1,107 days. In 2016, we did Deseos, that was another action in which we performed a press conference in parallel to the press conference of the government. But in this press conference that we did also with press, with the media, we announced our desires for these spaces. We also did Mala Nuestra, which was a digital intervention, a fake of a government digital announcement. In 2018, we did Bombachazo. Bombacha is a panty. And it was an action that we did for the 8th March, in which hundreds of artists, we put a panty in covering our face, vindicating this symbol that is a symbol of cover the face for demonstration, but giving it another sense in relation to the feminist struggle. And we did again a tour in front of the main theaters, and we made a manifesto making public some of the policies explicit or covered of patriarchal management of these spaces. And we did this in complicity with other collectives of queer and trans identities that were completely excluded directly of the resources and of these spaces. In parallel to these actions that we did during these years, we start to realize that we couldn't be all the time running behind the government agenda. And actually it was a moment that was very important in this sense. That was at the end of 2015. Macri, that was the head of this party, win the national election. So the battlefronts multiplied. It was really things to answer everywhere. So we realized that we needed to have at the same time a space and a time to have deeper reflections, and also to produce spaces where to imagine other ways of production and other ways of life. So in this sense, we did in 2016 the Transversal Congress, Escena Política, that maybe was one of our most relevant actions in terms of all the resonance it has. And we worked for almost a year in weekly meetings and in subgroups that were transformed according to the needs we had, and in dialogue with other collectives and other artists. We invited during these meetings for organizing the Congress, people from journalists, nightlife, sex workers, philosophy. The Congress was 4 days in which Escena Política was a kind of multi-form platform, a facilitator for this dialogue. And the Congress had really not the idea that we can have of a Congress of lectures, and it was, we did dancing assemblies and walking philosophical walks and many very interesting actions. In the following years, we continue to cultivate many of the bones and spaces that appeared during this Congress. We launched in 2017 the Master Escena Política, and we create some reading groups. And we thought a lot about how to use this experience that we had as an inspiring memory and not a crystallization of a form or a way of doing things. And how to defend the commons and its potentiality from the neoliberalist machine. So after this Congress, I think we are in this process of trying to understand how to be outside this machine and to continue giving value to this collective way of doing things.
Amazing. Thanks, Amparo, for that introduction. And we also have a couple of comments that I'll just read out. So we have thank you and greetings to our friends from Argentina. Saludos desde Grecia, camaradas.
Wow.
Grecia, I think I should have said, to sound more Argentinian. And then it says, great idea, the inspiring memory versus an event. So lovely. Yeah, it's really interesting hearing you talk about how Escena Política came into being, and some of your various actions that sound like, in some ways, like activist performances in a way, or installation style performances, and then how it's turned into also like you did now the Congress. So it's more than just activist actions. And are you all performing artists, or how many of you are there? How are you functioning? How did you function in the early days? I wondered if you could help us with anything like that.
Okay.
Over to you, Diego.
Well, the number of people that compose Escena Política is very mutating all the time. In the early days, we were, I guess, 20, but I mean, the number could be always the same, but the people inside of that number changes. I think that the way we function as a group is very blurry, and it seems like not organized at all, but it works organically, let's say. Yeah, I think there was from the beginning something about what being a collective meant for all of us. And it was more about dynamics than about organization and who is doing what. Even though it happened, of course, because actually what I think that organized us in the beginning the most was the fact that we decided to make a performance, like to have that aim at some point in your path organized us, since we are all performing artists, to do these actions, all these actions, the Informe SM, that was this investigation, this research about the San Martin Theater, but all the actions we did, because we did multiple actions that were part of this performance. I think I answered your question about the number and the early days working.
Yeah, and just before I pass on to Constantina, the action, which I believe was the Postales, which was bringing visibility to the closed venues, is that the correct title of action I'm talking about? Yeah, when we spoke the other day, you gave us a bit more of an insight into that, and I wonder if the audience might be interested to hear as well, because you were talking about how many of the many theatres across the city, maybe across the country, are in a state of disrepair or have been. I think you just mentioned now, Amparo, about one that had been closed for 1,000 days. But isn't it true that there are many that are not working or falling apart even?
Yes, I think in Buenos Aires there are 7 theaters that are the main public theaters, and of course and we talked a lot during this time. It's not that this was the most important problem happening at this moment, but what we understood at that time was that was kind of symptomatic of the emptying of the cultural area. And many of us were very active, also creating and producing in these spaces. So the relation was very, very close to these houses. So of course, it's not that it was just more a symptom of something that was happening in the area. And the situation of the theaters actually is that the government that was in the city at that time and is still in the city of Buenos Aires, they start to empty the theaters, so less and less works were presented there. Actually, in one of the actions we did that I forgot to say, that was Informe SM, Informe of the Theater San Martin, in which we did a very strong research about how the money was used and the circulation of the budget. And we knew, for example, that the theater was rented for parties of some of the people working in the government. So the situation of the theater was every day worse. And for us to talk about these places that were also very present in the imaginary of the community was also a way to talk about other things that were happening.
Yeah, and on that, we have a question. What about the independent scene? The 7 theatres mentioned, are they state theatres, or are there also more independent venues? And if yes, what's their state of being and working?
Well, yes, the seven venues Amparo just mentioned are the metropolitan venues, are the city complex of theater, and of course there are a lot of independent venues in the independent scene. I don't have the number, but when I left Buenos Aires, it was around 500 small venues, independent venues. And well, for the independent scene count with some subventions that helps them to survive as a venue, but of course, in financial and social crisis times, subventions are never enough to survive properly or to produce. And there is something very, very curious if you compare the South American or the Argentinian scene with the European scene in terms of subsidies, that there is no subsidy in Argentina that takes into account the salary of the art workers. So you get money to produce your piece, but it's never enough. And the idea of that you are a worker that needs to be paid for your work, it's not something on the table at all.
Yes, thank you for saying this, because this resonates a lot, I think, with all the actions and the reasons for which support our workers have been also trying to make that, really more visible, and to also fight against it. We have more questions, we will address them later, but until now you have been also talking about a way to activate the arts, what you have done in order to activate the theaters to make art more present in the city. But of course, since 2020, we have been in a pandemic, so things had to change, I guess, also for you. And maybe it's time to hear more about what you have been doing in your latest actions and how you have managed to pull that through, let's say. And what are your thoughts on it?
Yes, well, to activate things through art, because your own experience that it's not easy, but there is like a small gap or big gap, I don't know, between activating theater venues, official buildings, and activating cultural shifts in society. And I think that our decision let's say, sometimes you don't make decisions and you are just going with the flow, was to address more our work towards a cultural shift than to activate official buildings. Nevertheless, the fact that we worked repeatedly about our theaters as a symbol also provoked us or propelled us to try to work with the Teatro Colón, which is the opera of the city, in the context of Black Lives Matter after George Floyd's assassination, right? We started asking ourselves why these events didn't resonate as much as it resonated around the world in Argentina, or why social media from Argentina, people we know, people that we like also, felt related to what happened with George Floyd, but showed no feeling about what happens actually in Argentina with racial crimes. So we got an invitation from Planta, which is an independent venue from Buenos Aires, to curate or co-curate one bigger event called Race and Fiction, but that by that time there were no name for it, but it doesn't matter. And since the directors of Planta are part of Escena Política also, well, the whole collective got very involved in how to shape this whole event. This event was composed by 3 parts, and Escena Política was invited to co-curate and create pieces for 2 of those 3 parts. So let me go through a bit my notes. Yeah, for us was really important in our discussions about this this event and how to address these topics of racialization and the fiction that is produced by colonialism and the idea of race. How to address these topics without conquering the topics, because we are a white middle class collective mainly, and we felt from the beginning in our internal discussions about the topics we wanted to talk about that somehow we were not the accurate speaker for this these topics. So we understood that now it was really relevant to create a context in which we were not in the center of the stage at all. The curating task became more clear for us than in the past. So this idea of a curator that actually is creating a context. So we could actually say that the work of art that you are doing is the context, instead of, and there, if you think about the context, you are creating actually in act a social shift. So we started working with Identidad Marrón, which is a racialized collective from Argentina, and well, we shared all the decisions with them, even though if we were invited as curators or co-curators for this last 2 dates of the event. We divided all the decisions on the budget, etc. So we had these 2 dates. I need to speed up a bit to reach all the points. And well, one of them was colonialism as a sentimental education. Was the name. It was a creation by Escena Política, just Escena Política, in dialogue with Sasha Sawila from Bolivia, with Sally Schronfeld from Australia and Switzerland, and Carlos Mazota from Argentina. Here in this day, Escena Política shares its research and the creation process, so the strategies that the group used, and some transitory outcomes assembled in a 90 minutes film composed by a journey through our colonial sentimental education, the fictions of the Modern White Project, the phallic monuments placed in the city of Buenos Aires, the school events on national days, maps, lands, ownership, the cultivation of a decolonial garden in a abandoned monument in the city. I think it was the monument to the Spanish community, if I'm not wrong. Maybe Abby remembers better. And we did this kind of ritual of giving back, of things connected with colonialism and racism, but mainly with colonialism, this phase of the work, to give them back to Europe. Like, you brought this, thank you very much, but we don't want it anymore, take it back. And all these strategies that produced pieces were collected, as I said, in this film, and they were all of them as a collective attempt to reflect on our own coloniality. A bit following the same strategy that we mentioned when we perceived that we had the neoliberalism inside, and that was the reason why we said, okay, we need to do this Congress. So going back to race and fiction, the last part, the third part of the event was called Theater of Justice. This was the specific part that was co-curated and co-created between Identidad Marrón and Escena Política. It was also a film that collected different anti-racist actions we did in a specific area of the city that is called Square Lavalle, in which surroundings there are 3 buildings that for us were very relevant. That are the Palace of Justice, the primary school Presidente Roca, and the Theater Colón, the opera of the city. So we did multiple actions there, co-created with Identidad Marrón, and we recorded, and then we did this kind of a film of 60 minutes film to stream. This event was in the middle of the pandemics also, so everything was online and for free for the audience. So yeah, we started questioning ourselves about the relation between culture and justice, how these 2 spheres that seem to be very different and distant actually work together. What is the nexus between them? And following the premise of understanding culture, that culture produces a specific perspective of the world, and a correlation of forces on the conflicts of that world, while justice is the norm that dictates the veracity of an existence of the events that occurred in that world. So everything that happens, if it's about conflicts regarding the logics that are like hegemonic in that world, needs to be proven by justice. The justice says, yes, this happened, or this didn't happen. So we went to very basic questions about what is like a unquestioned truth for justice, like we are all equal before justice or before law, when actually we all know that it's not true. So working with this racialized collective helped us to not only to say that, but to really experience it through our own bodies and our own creative experience. Like sharing this experience with them was like impossible to deny, to neglect. So matter of privileges appeared a lot, also translated into collective dynamics. For instance, when Escena Política began, for us was very, very important to not to show our faces, not to give our names, because we knew from the beginning that in the moment we went into publicity to do something, media will capture us. And media always want one name, one face, someone who speaks in the name of the group. And we wanted to tackle that thing. But actually we realized, we understand, discussing with the Identidad Marrón, that their aim was to abandon this this crowd that they are, like from the whole history of Argentina, the indigenous population is los indios. So it's not even. Yes.
Diego, sorry, I will interrupt you because my connection was also a bit bad, but also I'm aware of the time. Maybe we can also address some of the questions and continue the description. Thank you so much. It's also a lot. I imagine it's also very recent, so it's even more something that you continue reflecting on. If I may, I will go back to one of the questions that arrived earlier, which also for me it's interesting in that context of your more recent work with race and fiction. So there was this question about whether you connected with political groups, with unions, workers, and searching for solidarity. And the person who asks that means it in the way of whether you have tried to be part of a social movement. I guess, as I understood, having alliances and collaborations and solidarities has been very important. But does that, for you, does that make you part of a social movement? What are your thoughts on this? Or has it changed over time?
Yes, I think that, as you said, Constantina, this kind of collaboration is actually in the center of our way of doing and thinking. From the beginning, we understand that if we wanted to produce a transformation, and not just outside, but also in our own practices, we needed to be in dialogue with others that have another experience of reality and other ways of doing things. So I think this is something that we are doing from the beginning, this kind of alliances with other activists and social movements. And I think one question that is all the time present for us, and it was very present when we did this action in race and fiction, was about how to produce bonds and collaborations that are not extractivist. I think the reflection about how in our practice we can reproduce these logics of appropriation and extractivism is very, very important, and was the most important question for us by doing the last activity, how to be there. And actually it was really hard for us. It was not easy. We were all the time doubting and thinking, this is not good, this is not okay that we are doing this, we cannot talk about this. We doubt a lot, and we decide, I think it was a good decision to inhabit this state of uncomfortability. It was not a comfortable place to be, and we decided to be in the place of listeners. For this, what Diego says about it's not about us doing something, talking about this, but maybe this time we can use this place of facilitator in a way, or hosters, but for listeners. So I think our main position was to be listeners. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. It also implies a different approach to social movement, this practice of decolonizing yourselves and your collective identity as well. I think that's quite remarkable. There is another question that has arrived. Hola, Escena Política. Could you tell us a bit, there is a preview. Is there a funding mechanism, or how do you fund your activities? Has the government invited you to discuss about your research and demands? So these are two questions. One is about funding, and the other one is about whether you have been in conversation with governmental mechanisms.
Regarding founding, originally we never had founding till the last action, Race and Fiction. That's something I didn't mention, but it was supported by Pro Helvetia, which was also a conflict for us. There was a chain of whiteness from Switzerland to Argentina, a complex degradé of chromatic logics there that were very colonial, actually. But for all our others productions, we didn't have foundings, right?
Yeah.
Actually, we did the Congress. We did it with no money at all. At all.
Yeah, it was all about collaborations.
And have you been in touch with the government or with politicians directly? Have they discussed and heard your demands?
Yeah, actually what I said in the beginning, I think these two dimensions are all the time going together. And we have some conversations. We ask for meetings with the authorities of theaters, and actually some changes happening. For example, it was one of the more smaller things. We asked for the change for public call for the directors, but also for the works that were presented. So we did very concrete demands that in these years some of these things changed. So we have a relation with the authorities. But I think in the last year was more difficult. At the beginning was more present, and then was with Macrismo, the last year was very, very hard. So I think it's because of that we start to turn into this other, putting our energy and our time in building these other connections and these commons with other collectives and social movements.
Yes, yes, and actually, in the beginning of the collective, we started gathering because we understood that the dialogue with the administration was not there, and we needed to to have some kind of dialogue. And then this dialogue start appearing, but in this very neoliberal way, in which the administration says we want to dialogue, we want to dialogue. So you go to the meeting, and then you spend 2-3 hours in the meeting, and nothing happens about the thing actually. So it's a fake dialogue, and the rest, Ampi just said it.
There is one last question, and we are a bit over time already. There is one question that is about, Hola, Escena Política. Could you tell us a little bit about the social movement around the national dance law, and if you think that this could be a way to guarantee the labor rights of cultural workers? Quite specific.
Yeah, actually about la Ley Nacional de Danza, the national law of dance, is something that part of us in Escena Política, we are also part of another group that is Foro Danza en Acción. And for many years we claimed for this law because, and I think the other day when we talked, I think maybe in Greece is similar situation, but in Argentina, to be a dancer, you are not a worker. There is really not, there is not a status as a worker. So you don't have insurance, you are not, you are working just as a freelancer, but not, there is no law in relation to that. So for many years, there is this fight for asking for this law. Now this is more close. And of course, we don't know exactly how this will work. There are many discussions going on there, but at least is to start to think that first that as art or dance workers, we are workers and we have rights for that. So this is the first thing. And then it also changed the status of dance in the public sphere as a place where knowledge is created. Yeah, so I think it's something that it will change something, but it's something and a struggle going on.
Yeah, it's a very interesting conversation. I mean, for any arts and culture workers not to be recognized as workers, like Konstantina said earlier, following one of your introductory points, that was a lot of the reason why support art workers came about here, for to say people working in arts are workers as well. There's a lot more that we would love to hear about Escena Política, but we've reached the end of our time for today. And we have a nice message from one of our colleagues who said, thank you for the informative discussion. Gracias todos. Stay safe and creative. Of course, we wish that to everyone. Stay safe and creative. And the films that you were talking about, Diego, when they become available, please do share them with us, because we would love to see them and to share them also with our with the support art workers wider group and beyond. And yeah, thanks everyone who was watching on the Facebook and for your questions and comments. Yeah, it's been, for me, a really interesting conversation, and I would love to speak to you about it all for several hours. So maybe we need to catch up on another occasion. Yeah, so on behalf of all of us here at Support Art Workers, thanks so much to Amparo and Diego. Yeah, and we'll wrap it up for there, but please do keep in touch. and we can drop the link, the Escena Política website, into the Facebook comments so that everyone can follow you and see some images of your actions and stuff. Let me just grab that link now to
Thank you so much. Thank you, Amparo and Diego, and everyone who has been attending the event.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks to you. And I wish this is the first of a series of encounter. I think it's very, again, it is a gesture, a very valuable gesture to have this kind of sharing of experiences and tools and knowledge. And I am very curious to continue knowing about you. I think it's, yeah, we need to do another so we listen to you.
Yes.
Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much for coming on and speaking to us. So have a nice evening, everyone, or afternoon if you're in Argentina. And thanks again. Cheers.
Thanks.
Okay.